Yeah, I think for me, I have a lot of different day to days. In season, we obviously play 82 games. My job, I'm at pretty much all 82 home and road. We get to travel with the team for away games and then obviously work all of our home games in LA. Um, with the Kings, I mean, the LA market has a lot of sports media, but the Kings are not all that high up on that list in terms of, the Lakers and the Dodgers and USC and UCLA and all these different large sports programs that LA has. The Kings don't quite have the media presence that a lot of those teams do. So a big part of my job is to kind of be media coverage for the Kings, though I also work for the Kings. So in season, I'm a little bit like a team writer where I write stories, do podcasts and video content about the team to provide coverage for the Kings in our market. And then I also oversee other, written audio and video content for the team. I try to work on, the storytelling and the narrative direction that the Kings take as an organization. So in season, game days are very busy. Off season, it's a little bit lighter. But there's just a lot of different kind of facets to what I get to do, which is really cool.
How'd you get into this role?
So I have a degree in sports communication from a place you've probably never heard of, Marist College in New York. It's about 90 minutes north of New York City, very small school. But I knew from the start that I wanted to work in sports, and specifically I wanted to work in communication. I have a PR background. I did PR in the minor leagues for 8 years. I worked in the ECHL, which is double A. I worked in the AHL, which is triple A. And then when I got to the Kings, the opportunity was to move more into the written side, which was probably the part of PR that I liked best anyway. Instead of writing, press releases, it became articles. So I've worked in hockey now for almost 13 years between the three leagues, and was just kind of fortunate to work myself up through the ranks.
Very nice. And I'll give you guys a chance to ask some questions a little later. But when it comes to applying your degree in sports communication to this particular position, are there skills that really stand out in terms of things that you learn that you use every single day? And is there something that you were surprised by when it comes to you didn't think it was going to be that big of a deal in college, but now you find yourself very well versed in that particular skill?
I'm going to answer the second one first. And I don't know if it's a skill so much as it is a thing, but
Right.
like you never know what piece of experience that you have might stand out to you. And the story that I use is I was coming off my first job in sports. I worked a year with the AHL's Utica Comets. It was a entry level role. I made basically $0 and tried to move up. And I had an interview for a lead PR role in a different team in the same league. And when I went there, he went through my resume and he looked at an internship I did as a sophomore in college with a college summer league baseball team where I just did broadcasts and wrote stories. It was the most like BS internship of all time. I literally made no money. It was a ridiculous thing, but that was the thing on my resume 4/5 of the way down that he looked at and said, "Hey, what was this? It was near here. Do you know the area?" And I was able to use that experience to essentially parlay myself into that job. And the moral of the story is like, no matter how little you think something might be, if it's relevant, you never know how it might help you down the line. And I literally would not have gotten that job without that piece of experience, as minimal as I thought that it was in my career. So I always try to tell people just you can never have too much application of what you're learning in the classroom and too much experience because you just never know what might resonate with someone who is hiring you and what might separate you from a field of a lot of people who want the same job that you want.
And I think you bring up an interesting point here is that all the sports jobs that, we have had, that other people in the business, absolutely love and are great at, it is very, very competitive. And it's not just, okay, well, if you have a connection to Los Angeles or a connection to your hockey team, then that gives you necessarily an advantage because a lot of people have those similar connections. And so, I ask you this, and I certainly have asked tons of other people this. How does someone in college, fresh out of graduation, stand out compared with anyone else?
I think a well-formatted resume, as little as that sounds, will help. You've no idea how many poorly formatted resumes that I have seen. Um, One page, most relevant stuff at the top and least relevant stuff at the bottom. And you will beat out at least 50% of a field that doesn't understand that. Um, it's an easy way for people at an early stage in a job process to get weeded out is to not have your stuff together. And if you have everything buttoned up perfectly, you will be much, much more likely to proceed than you would otherwise. Networking is extremely important. It's very hard to network when you're in college, but sports is an industry where word of mouth and relationships and references and recommendations go a long way. So if you know someone, if you have someone who can make a call, if you can send an introductory email, if you just have any kind of connection that can help you, don't be afraid to use it. That will go a long way over someone who might have a similar experience set or skill set, but doesn't have that. So I would just say that do all of the little details well, and you will be surprised how much it sets you apart from a large pack.
One thing that I know you would agree with is when it comes to journalism and writing, that the relationships that you have with the players and coaches and front office matter about as much as anything. At the same time, it can be challenging, not just in terms of the fact that the season is really long, but also too, if say there's a losing streak and they're just bad vibes and people aren't, happy about it, that can also wear down any relationship, even if you come at it with good faith. How do you maintain those relationships through all of that adversity?
I try to lean into just professionalism. Look, it is hard, right? Because I'm probably the person in my job that the players and coaches see the most. So, and for me, like I work for the team, I'm on the team travel and the bus and the plane. So can't afford to lose a relationship. Um, but I'll give an example of it was a couple years ago. I was interviewing a player after a game that we lost. And typically post game, we interview two players. And the first one, our PR guy was tapping me on the shoulder a couple questions in to let me know the second player was ready. So just, hey, kind of hurry it up here. And in that process, to the player I was interviewing, it looked like I was blowing him off. It looked like I wasn't paying attention to him or listening to what he was saying. And he gave me short answers and then kind of went off and was a little cold to me after that. And I went to our PR guy and I said, hey, can you just ask him, like, hey, did I do something wrong here? I just want to make sure to be able to keep the relationship because, as you said, they're extremely important. So he went up to him, the PR guy, and he said, hey, is there anything wrong here? And he explained the same story, but from his perspective. And a simple conversation from me the next day where I just essentially fell on the sword. I said, hey, I'm sorry. This is the situation we were in. You shake hands and you move on. Um, Professionalism in those relationships is so big. The guys understand that media is a part of their job, but don't waste their time either. And if you keep that relationship professional, I think that it goes a long way in preserving it. The Kings this season, are not all that good. We've really struggled. We're in the playoff race, but we've lost a lot more games than we've won this year, and that has certainly made it difficult. We had a coaching change mid-season. We've traded several players away from our starting roster, and that is a bit of a management. And when that happens, you lean on the players that you know more. And when you lose a lot and you go to the same players with the same kinds of questions game over game, it definitely can strain it if you don't approach it the right way. So I think that for me, I've always tried to make it a little bit of a business transaction when you're doing the interview. And then there's time to have the personal relationship on the side, but making sure that in that moment, you're respectful of their time with fair questions, but also questions that, help to get the coverage and the content that you need for the team.
One more question for me, and then I'll open it up to you guys. When it comes to this balance, because yes, you have to be honest, and fans, they see through BS. If you're putting something out there that's a little bit too positive, a little bit too, Pollyanna-ish. at the same time, there are also work commitments where, you're not going to go out there and disparage the team like some hot sports take. How do you strike that balance?
I think it's one of the hardest lines to find for sure. And like I've crossed it at times and gotten, a slap on the wrist of like, hey, maybe don't use that word or maybe tone it down a little bit in certain situations. Social media has really changed the way that coverage is perceived. 20 years ago, not everyone's voice was maybe meant to be heard or had a platform to be heard. Now everyone in the world has a platform to have their voice be heard if they want to. And when you're hiding behind a Twitter account or an Instagram account or whatever it is, you can say whatever you want to someone who has their face on their profile with no repercussions, really. And people will do that. There are a lot of people who get it a lot worse than me. Like, I have friends and colleagues who are women in sports who get abused by these kinds of people online for the most ridiculous types of things. And they have it a lot harder than I do. But it's very difficult right now to, I think, create content in a world of social media where you kind of have to play by one set of rules and the people receiving your content don't have rules. That makes it very difficult. So I feel that I've been able to push the line a little bit further each and every year between team coverage and maybe unbiased, honest coverage. If you say things that are just that you don't believe in and that are untrue, people will see through it just the way that any of us would see through someone else's work that they don't believe in or that is clearly not true. So you have to find that line of what is appropriate, but also what is honest. And I try to lean heavily into what players and coaches say, because if the players and coaches say we were bad, you kind of have a license to write that the team was bad. And you don't have to say anything that they didn't say themselves. And you can fall back on that. When you become kind of a rogue columnist or, a hot takes person just on your own, that's when it can get a little tricky. But I try to really lean into, when we have the opportunity, when the players and coaches understand that they aren't playing well, it's a chance to be able to have that more honest, critical coverage that resonates with fan bases because you're not going against anything that, your most prominent public figure said.
Very good. Questions from the group? Anything professional? We can also talk hockey as well. Anything and everything is fair play. Go for it.
How many hours is your work week?
In season, it is probably 60 or 70. And in the summer, I try to get out of there as often as possible. So it's probably more like 30 to 40. But in season, I mean, it's 6 to 7 days a week, mostly full days, sometimes, 10 to 12-hour days when you play a game. So it's a lot in season.
And the travel, there's also that.
And I do travel also, which is very cool to get to see, a lot of North America. But also it is quite a bit, of work and, late nights and things like that. But it's one of those things that if you really like it, it's not that bad, but it's a lot of work along the way.
What is it about the LA market in terms of hockey? Yes, you mentioned that hockey does have to compete with some brands like the Lakers and the Dodgers, especially now. But what is it about the hockey community in LA that is different, unusual than, say, the rest of North America?
So we played the Edmonton Oilers in the playoffs 4 years in a row, and we've lost all four. But provides kind of a good foil for what LA is. I've always thought that the most passionate fan in LA is just as passionate as the most passionate fan in Edmonton. But LA has 1,000 of those fans, and Edmonton has 100,000 of those fans. You go to some of the Canadian markets, and every business has an Oilers flag on the front door, and you go inside and they have posters and ways to market the team. And just like in some of those cities, hockey is just ingrained in their community. Like the city of Edmonton revolves around the Oilers. Whereas in LA, it's just so different. It's very spread out. There are way more things to do. The weather's nicer. There's just a lot more going on than there is in some of those other cities. So the diehards in LA are just as passionate and care just as much as the diehards anywhere else. It's just a little bit harder because there are fewer of them. And hockey is, not the biggest sport for kids in LA. It's still growing, it's developing, it's getting better, but it's not as accessible or as popular as baseball or soccer or something like that. So it's definitely faces challenges in that way. And it's always been really interesting to see how different, certain markets are. And going up to Canada is really, really eye-opening for sure.
It's another question you guys have. How do you, when it comes to other writers for the Kings and other content creators, how do you shape what they are putting together?
Like people who work for us or
Yeah,
like people, yeah. Um, I think it's important to let people have free reign to an extent. Um, you don't want to you don't want to tell people what to say because then they don't have the ability to be authentic and to be themselves and to be able to be at your best. I think you have to be authentic to who you are as a content creator. So you and I both know, say, Jesse Cohen,
yeah.
very very different person than I am, but we work fairly well together, as you know.
Hmm.
We
Yeah,
work well together because we both have high standards and we both have a lot of passion and care a lot about what we do. We would just take completely opposite approaches to how we would get there. So it's someone like Jesse who is really, really talented, but if I tried to just say you have to talk this way or talk about this, he wouldn't be any good. I have to let him take his own approach to get to where we want to get to within the guardrails of, what we can do as an organization. And I think you get better output that way if you let someone be themselves and try to steer them the right way as opposed to giving them the complete path they have to take. I think that those people will be a lot more successful.
for sure. Sure. It's another question you guys have.
I didn't ask any questions in a 9:15 a.m. lecture either.
Go for it.
How do you remain positive, awake, and ready throughout the day with such a long work week?
Coffee. I don't know. I guess you just get used to it, like you kind of get used to functioning on less sleep. In the NHL, you play night games and then you fly immediately after the game. So you usually get into the next city, 1 or 2 in the morning. And then oftentimes you're kind of up the next day, 8 or 9. So you don't really get that full night of sleep very often. So you just kind of get used to it. I don't know if there's really a good way to put it, but eventually you just kind of get used to it and adjust. It's a good question. I don't really know.
Do you have to like Tim Hortons coffee if you're in the Canadian markets?
Yes, I think so. I think if you live there, you think it's pretty bad, actually. But if you're visiting every so often, it's really good.
Yeah, I think it's that way with like a lot of things. Like, they can make fun of it, but no one else on the outside can make fun of it.
I like it when I get to visit Canada, but if you ask Canadians, they think it's like chain garbage.
They're right. That's
Yeah.
fair. Who else has a question? We've got a few more minutes here. Again, we can talk hockey. Yeah, go for it.
Is it harder to write and interview players when the team is in like a dry spell where like they're losing week after week?
Definitely. Especially when, you work for a team. Because at the end of the day, like teams are businesses and teams need to sell tickets and sponsorships and make money. So if you're putting out a bunch of negative content to your fans, it's not exactly incentivizing people to want to go watch them play, which kind of hurts your bottom line. So, I mean, this year I don't think we've had a winning streak of more than 3 all year, or if we did, it was once. It's been a really tricky year, probably my most challenging in covering our team because we had high expectations coming into the year and largely haven't met them. So when you're battling up against, not only if you're bad, but people think you'll be bad, it's fine. If you're bad, but people think you're going to be good, it's a lot harder. So I would say definitely it's a lot trickier to do that and to find storylines about a team every single day when you are losing games and players aren't playing well. It's very difficult. And I think it kind of tests you a lot more when the team isn't playing well. When the team's playing well, it's really easy. You can just kind of feed off the momentum. I think you get a lot better at what you do when the team isn't good because you have to still be able to produce the same quality of content every single day, but it's about much more, negative things.
Any other questions? Yeah.
What's your most memorable work or accomplishment that you like?
That's a good question. When I worked in the AHL, we hosted the All-Star game in Ontario, California. And going through that, you always see these events from the outside and you don't realize, you just say, oh, it happens on a weekend and then it's over. It was probably about 18 months of planning going in with meetings, every single week for 18 months to put on an event with a small core group of people. And it was extremely rewarding at the end to kind of see the event happen, to sell out the building, to have a bunch of cool stuff come from it. That was a really memorable event for me. And in that event, one of our players set the North American record for hardest shot in the skills competition, 109 miles an hour. And we were able to be ready. You can't predict that happening. So we were ready to kind of capitalize on that in the moment. And it turned an amazing weekend into an even better one because we were so well planned that we could handle a curveball like that. And, we got a ton of coverage out of it. It was a really, really special and rewarding weekend that just came from so much more planning than I ever would have thought could go into a 2-day event.
Very good. Last question before I let you go. I know some of our students may not necessarily be Kings fans, or they may not be hockey fans, or too aware of the sport. What should they know about Anze Kopitar and just how important he has been to hockey in Southern California?
He's the king of kings. He's not the best player to have ever played for the Kings. That's Wayne Gretzky, but he is the best king of all time. You always hear about players in sports who do lots of things under the radar that kind of go unnoticed that help teams win. And Anze Kopitar is the master of that. He does so many little things and has for 20 years that have been key to successful teams, including 2 championship teams with the Kings, all while being an elite offensive player in the NHL. He set the Kings all-time points record just a couple of weeks ago in New Jersey. And he's done it the right way for so long. Having gotten to know him, he's a really, really good person, away from the ice. And he has a lot of people wanting him to do well because of how good of a person that he is. And that's on top of just being an incredible player. Hard to find a comparable for him in other teams, but he's just that guy that does everything the right way, but also does it at the highest of levels. And it's been, extremely special to be able to kind of be a part of it a little bit and just watch him operate so close for the last 5 or 6 years. And it'll be exciting to see him, in the Hall of Fame sometime soon.